Who Watches the Rewatchers, a Buffy rewatch podcast.
Do you remember the 90s? Were you into clowning? Did you grow up with a strange mixture of, I don't know, gangster rap and grunge rock music playing? Are you nostalgic? If you are, then you might like our show. Welcome to Who Watches the Watchers, our podcast where we rewatch Joss Whedon's masterpiece, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. My name's Jarrod. I'm with my friend Alan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Jarrod. What's going on in your world?
I don't know. Were you into clowning, Alan?
I was never into clowning, but there was a minute when my daughter went to circus school and learned how to do some clowning and learned how to do some of the trapeze stuff.
That's cool, man. But I was in clown club in high school for a minute, just for a minute.
Really?
Yeah, it was a thing. And I probably walked out to some Natalie Merchant song or the Gin Blossoms, and I quit because I realized it was probably not going to get me a lot of popularity points. But nevertheless, I was into Buffy. How about you? Were you into Buffy? I think we know you were.
We know I was. But I did come to it late. I did come to it later than you did.
Well, listen, man, we finally got to an episode I think you and I have been looking forward to. This is season 2's first go-around, or Buffy's first go-around at Halloween, which I think is just ample fun for the Whedonverse to create all sorts of, it just pushes, it's a whole world to push against and create some new fun expectations.
That's exactly right.
The first being, and I'll just set the tone off, is that according to Giles the Watcher, as he tells all the Scoobies at some point, that Halloween is a pretty chill, low-key time for the demons. It's not something that I don't think they ever truly explain, but there's not a night of high demonic and vampiric activity. I got that right? They don't really explain that, right, Alan?
There's a little bit of talk about it in, I think it's a season 6 or 7 episode when Spike is explaining to the vampire, like, teenagers that are off with Dawn, why the vampires don't do much on Halloween. But we should save that conversation for that episode.
Absolutely. I think there's a question or two where, like, do they just find it sort of ironic, or like there's some
I think it's if I remember the basics of that conversation, but it's been a while. I believe it's something to the effect of how it's, I don't know, in poor taste for the vampires to be out there with all the fake vampires.
Yeah. Well, why don't we dive on into this episode? Because this is episode number, I'm trying to figure out which one it is. Oh my goodness.
This is season 2, episode 6.
That's right. And not to throw too much shade into it, but this is the first time I ever questioned Sarah Michelle Gellar's acting. And it's actually not her acting. It's just the accent work. But let's get there. How does the episode begin?
I was sure you were going to say not to throw too much shade, but this one was particularly bad for poor Angel.
Well, yeah. I mean, I got some stuff to say.
All right. So the show opens up with Buffy, as she's wont to do, crushing a vampire.
Well, I thought that the opening shot was amazing because it was a bottom side falling on top of a jack-o'-lantern at a pumpkin patch.
That's right.
So I like that. So she's at fisticuffs with the vampire,
and there's a whole bunch of really, really inventive fight scenery going on here. And it keeps getting, like, just barely interrupted by someone who's shooting it with a camcorder.
Which I found humorous because, like you, I grew up in the era of camcorders, and it was at that stage in the battery life where it was warning the person using, the vampire using. So the vampire is doing like what the dads did in the 90s at wrestling meets. They were getting footage of their kids so they could go back and coach them up later. So they're getting some game tape on Buffy.
Right.
Presumably for Spike, which that Spike comes back onto the scene. But yeah, I just thought it was funny, the gag where he even takes the camera away from his eye and shakes it like that's going to help the battery life.
Yes, yes, totally. Like all the dads did at that time.
Yeah, that was a 1990s version of turn it off and turn it on.
That's right.
Have you shaken your VCR?
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
So they're fighting, they're there, and he's videoing the fight to, I guess, to find out the pulled punches and all that stuff and how Buffy does her fakes and whatnot.
Yep.
They're studying her moves.
Studying her moves. And she's got some really impressive ones in this particular fight. I think this is the most complicated fight scene we've seen on Buffy so far.
I did think about it because they actually make a joke. So a couple episodes ago when we do Inca Girl, I threw some shade saying this was very Xena warrior princess and Kevin Sorbo like Hercules level
Yeah.
quality fighting and filmmaking. And
Sure.
I immediately when I watched this fight, I thought, wait, this is way better. This is way more technical. It's way more elaborate. It looks better. It just has a better look to it. And then later in the episode, somebody, I think it's
Willow.
Willow says, couldn't she have dressed up like Xena?
That's right.
Because, well, we'll get to that. But I thought that was it made me chuckle. All right. So
me too.
After the fight, she shows up at the Bronze because she's supposed to have a date with Angelus or Angel. And he's there having a conversation with Cordelia. And if there is any shade to throw, he is laughing a little too hard at every one of her little comical comments. I thought, once again, I thought, come on, man, you should know better than that. You're 200 plus years old. She's not saying anything really funny, but you act interested.
The only on-camera joke we got was, I told Devin that the interior of his car, my Barbie dream car had a nicer interior than his car. That's what her joke was.
Right. And it's snarky, and Angel laughs like it's like he's full of snark himself, but whatever.
Does he even know what a Barbie is? That's what I really want to know.
That's what I want to know too. And all those 200 years of his dark and like mopey attitude in the sewers.
Right.
Did he come across a few Barbie dream cars?
No. You know what this actually what this scene actually reminded me of?
What's that?
Is there's this Saturday Night Live bit about Twilight, where they have one of the dude actors pretending to be the guy from Twilight, and one of the girl actresses pretending to be the girl from Twilight. And she says, "How old are you?" And he says, "I'm 17." And she says, "But how long have you been 17?" And he says, "Like 30 years." And she says, "Wait, so you're like 47?" And he goes, "I guess technically, but I've been 17 for 30 years. And she says, "I'm like, I thought you were going to say you're like 200 or something." And he goes, "Would that make it better?" And she says, "Well, 200 seems magical. You being 47 seems like you're my dad." That's what was going through my head when I saw this. All right, I'm good now.
Okay. You know what? If you were going to just cite Twilight, I'd be a little throwing some, well, I'd throw some shade your way. But since it's SNL throwing shade, that's fine with me. Buffy turns around like she's threatened by Cordelia and the giggle that Angel offers to her. But Angel sees her and says, in his very New Jersey accent, "Buffy." And then he runs over and she turns around and there's a piece of straw in her hair from the pumpkin patch. And I thought that was a pretty cute moment. She said, "Occupational hazard."
Yes.
And there we go. And, basically they kind of continue their schmoopy moment. But the next day we cut to the high school where Principal Snyder is, again, with the strange principling, the strange stuff that the school does. I mean, I thought about that, like, this is a weird thing. I've never seen this before. What he's doing is he's forcing students that he considers to be troubled, I guess, Buffy, Willow, and Xander. They're supposed to chaperone children to go trick-or-treating. Presumably they don't have parents or they don't have anyone to take them. And so he's going to pair them up with students. I guess it's a program. But what's really funny to me is how little he thinks of Buffy, that he's like, you're not even allowed to talk to him, but you have to take him. So it's this completely, you can't win the situation, right?
So first of all, yes, this is very like contrived and forced in order to get the situation happening. I totally agree with that. What I thought was weird the first time that I saw it was, wait, let me get this straight. You think Buffy's delinquent, and you think putting her with homeless kids,
right,
is a good idea. Okay, so that's crazy in and of itself. But I got to tell you that knowing what I know about season 3 of Buffy, I'm more than a little convinced that what's really going on here is that Principal Schneider he knows that if he forces Buffy to dress up, because it's one of the rules, that she's going to go to the place that has the magic costumes and it's going to cause problems. And he's actually operating on behalf of the chaos agents in town.
Okay, time. Do
Please.
they make that connection later on? Am I forgetting that?
Okay, so in season 3, it's clear, it's very clear that Schneider is in the pocket of the mayor. And the mayor is still the mayor right now. We just haven't met him yet.
We just haven't met him, right? Yes, that's true. So this also goes back a few episodes or maybe even longer where there are these subtle hints with FBI type agents and the police chief that, I think it was back when there's the parent-teacher conference and Joyce takes the lead.
Sure.
And that's where Schneider starts telling people these are delinquents on PCP. And the police are like, are we still telling people the PCP thing or whatever? And that, they do set it up like he's in some sort of secretive, clandestine group or whatnot.
Right.
I guess what you're saying, that does make some sense. Yeah, but when you're watching it from this point.
But when you're
right,
watching, it doesn't make any sense. And I got to say, I feel like an apologist right now. Go on.
No, actually, because your memory is helping us. We're rewatching this, but we've watched it before. So you're helping fill in some dots. That's great. So you're not apologizing. And also I know that you love a Principal Schneider moment because he's so good.
Yes.
He just chews up the scenery, man. He's so good. He just plays it so well. I'm sorry. I know that you feel the same way, but.
Oh, I do. Armin Shimmerman or whatever his name is, he is a brilliant dude. And have I told you that my wife is like infatuated with him?
Yeah, you have.
Which is super weird because she's also infatuated with Spike, but go on.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, how could he not? I got a crush on Spike. I mean, he's got that fun attitude with heart. But then
that's right.
I think we have another fun moment in the school. Larry, the school bully, who I believe, and I'm not going to look this up right now. I believe he was also the bully in the first Hocus Pocus.
Oh.
One of the two kids, not the long hair guy, I think.
Okay.
But if I'm wrong, forgive me. Larry, the school bully, is threatening Xander, but only because he asks about Buffy, and he says, I heard that she's fast. And that makes
Buffy. So Xander tries to stand up for Buffy.
Yeah, it's his honor. It's his honor to stand up for her honor, I think is the way to think about it. Because he's about to get pummeled by Larry, and Buffy steps in. And I think it's funny because when she pushes him up against the soda machine, we say in the Midwest, the pop machine, a Diet Dr. Pepper comes out, and it's what she would want to drink. And for her, it's like dust the dust off her hands, no big deal. She took care of the bully who was bothering her friend, and she got a soda. Meanwhile, Xander's pride has been hurt, been dinged up. Why'd you do that? I was about to get pummeled by Larry.
Yeah,
which would have been like, I guess, would give him bro marks.
What he says is he says a black eye will heal. What's the rest of that?
But this bruised ego won't, basically. Yeah. Which is that's pretty interesting, and you got to give it to Xander. He's always trying to do the right thing.
That's right. So,
by the way, there's this. Well, are you going to cut to the bathroom with Willow and Buffy?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So at that point, Buffy sits down with Willow, explains that she has broken the unwritten boy code or whatever, and then they cut to describing her date with Angel last night, and this is really sort of the inciting incident for the rest of it. Buffy kind of says, well, he was talking to Cordelia and Willow says, well, he'll never fall for her shtick. And Buffy says, do you mean the one where she's bathed and dressed in a stunning outfit? And, so anyway, they come up with this idea that they need to find out what kind of girls Angel is into. And that they can learn this by reading the Watcher diaries. But they are private and by the way, I thought this was really also very contrived. They say that they're private and that Giles keeps them sort of under lock and key in his office, and that it would be wrong for them to sneak in and read them. That's exactly what they go to do. And there's a very clever, not clever maybe, but maybe cute shot right after they say this where it would be wrong, and then they cut to them,
trying,
getting ready to commit the crime. You know, I won't be an apologist about this one. I have no idea why the Slayer wouldn't be allowed to read the Watcher diaries.
I don't either. Or maybe, if I will be an apologist, maybe it's just because they are assuming that they're not allowed to look in there. Maybe they're just making this stupid, like, adolescent, poor assumption, right? But
I
listen,
suppose now that I'm really thinking about it, it might also be possible that they're going to read about how every individual Slayer died, and that might be bad for morale.
yeah, that is true. That is true because they do set it off by reminding us that Spike has fought 2 Slayers in his history, and he's won both times.
Right.
That was in the, and if you watch it on Hulu as I did last night, that
Mm.
is on the last time on Buffy. So they do set it off that way.
That's right. That's right.
So they go and begin the prowling around the Watcher diaries. And in the book, in one of the diaries, they see information about Angel, and Lord knows why, but whatever Watcher drew a beautifully sketched drawing of a 18th century woman that you really can't, in my estimation, tell much about how she looks. You can tell what she's wearing, but for whatever reason, both Willow and Buffy are impressed, and it makes Buffy feel even more insecure.
Sure.
And I think it's just really great because I think it's really great to see them in the bathroom talking on the sinks about how insecure Buffy is over Cordelia, because
Yes.
here, when you're sitting on this side of the television, especially when I'm a teenager, Sarah Michelle Gellar, she's been in the soap operas. She's a network television star. She's on the cover of magazines. She's considered beautiful. And they have her playing some kid who is just insecure,
Yes.
which is really the case for everybody, no matter how popular or beautiful you are. So I like that they show that humanity there. And this drawing that they see in the Watcher diaries or journals or what they're called, the diaries, I guess. She says, I could never look like that. I could never be like that. For whatever reason, it scratches that little itch inside of her brain that says, you're not enough.
Mm-hmm.
And Willow is saying, no, you're great, and still trying to do the best friend thing. But
She absolutely is.
anyway, yeah,
My favorite line in there was, "Look how tiny her waist is."
right. Yeah. I love that too. And I even thought about it last night when I was watching about how, like, how that is the way we all sort of think. Like,
Mm.
you can be, someone else can look at you and go, man, you look great. You look fit. You look in shape. And then compare yourself to someone else, and their calf muscles are more defined than yours. And you can, oh, my calves aren't good enough. It's always, the goalpost keeps moving.
You know what's really interesting about that is that, for me anyway, at this particular moment, I'm a professor at a school in Knoxville, and I'm always teaching design students, people who are trying to learn how to do visual art in a variety of capacities better. And my advice to them, and sometimes I worry about this, but my advice to them is always, look at the work of other people and imitate it deeply, trying to figure out what they did and why they made creative decisions so that you can make similar creative decisions as opposed to just pure imitation. And the thing that I worry about with that sometimes is exactly what you're talking about, where they're going to look at the work of somebody else and think, oh, I'm never going to be able to do that. And then they just give up.
Yeah, I think that's a worry, but that requires further correction, right? And further guidance and help. But, well, I think there's another moment we should just kind of briefly gloss on. That Cordelia comes in, and actually she's not, like, she comes in probably softer. She's still Cordelia, but she's less caustic than she used to be. She comes in and she's talking about Angel. What's your deal? Blah, blah, blah. And Buffy and Willow, in very humorous ways, let her know that Angel's in fact a vampire. And that was kind of a moving
Yes.
little moment
Right.
of community,
I
because
thought so too.
Cordelia has for a little while been on the inside knowledge of the Hellmouth, but she's always been a liminal figure to the Scoobies. And here in the bathroom, where there's presumably no one else, they're able to openly speak about it with her, and she's being brought further into their world. So I thought that was kind of cool. But we cut from that moment. Yeah. I'm saying we cut from that moment, and now they're going to what I would call a Halloween store, but it's a costume shop called Ethan's Costume Shop. By the way, there was this place in Champaign, Illinois, which is about 40 minutes from where I grew up. That's where University of Illinois is, Champaign-Urbana. and it was called Dallas and Company. And I remember the commercials when I was a kid of Dallas and Company. It was kind of one of those old school brick and mortar costume shops that was open all year round. It wasn't just for Halloween. And I have it on good authority. It recently closed, like in the past few years. And a little piece of my soul hurt. I won't say
Nice.
died, but hurt, because the idea that there's a store you could go to and buy costumes and prank gifts and magic tricks and interesting, weird, sort of goofy stuff is sort of, it's sort of a, I don't know, it's a fantasy for me to run a shop like that. And yeah, but anyway, that's what Ethan's is supposed to be. And there they go in. Willow, she gets a ghost costume. And I think it's
Yep.
really funny. It's a white sheet that says ghost on it.
Yes.
Xander's going to get fatigues and a little gun with a little orange tip on it to let everyone know it's a toy. He's going to be a soldier.
Yeah.
And as they're walking around, there's this 18th century pink dress, right? Or whatever. They say it's from
Yep.
the 18th century. Oh, it happens to look just like that dress from the Watcher's Diaries. And the shop's owner, Ethan Rain, comes in and says, "You must have this." And she goes, "It's quite remarkable." And he goes, yeah, he says something like, "I absolutely agree." Or like, he's just trying to be very gallant. He's very British, trying to be charismatic with her. And he feels moved to make her an offer because
Right.
she could not afford it. And
Right.
because of all of that, you're tipped off. He's up to something.
He's up to something.
yeah.
And you know his name. You, Jarrod, know his name
Mhm.
because he comes back and in future episodes, and I think that his entrance is a starting point for them to start talking about Giles's backstory.
Yeah, and incidentally, what's in a name? Sometimes I look into the naming of characters to see if there might be something symbolic. I did not hear, but
Nice.
the name Ethan Rain sounds particularly cool, or even maybe a little bit dangerous to me. Ethan Rain.
Okay.
You don't think so?
All right. I like it. I had not thought of that before, but yes, now that you've said it, I agree.
It's kind of like John Wick. That's pretty cool.
Sure.
Or Jack Reacher. I don't know if people shudder at the name Jarrod Longbonds.
I was like, well, they certainly don't shudder at the name Alan Barnes, that's for sure. All right, so,
Meanwhile, we're now back in Spike's lair. I think we cut from that
yes.
to Spike's lair, where he is. I actually thought I know what they're going to be doing, and they were doing it. They were reviewing the fight from they were watching the tape, as it were.
Yes.
That was taken of Buffy fighting. I thought, boy, this is going to be lame. There's not going to be much to be done there unless the guy who plays Spike can really pull it off, and he really did pull it off. I think, as he's like, look at that. That's resourceful. That is, you know.
Yeah, totally. And is this the first time that we find out that Drusilla has visions? I don't remember that being part of the last episode with her.
I think so. I think you do. Listen, we could go back and we could watch the tape ourselves, but I think they let on that she's had some visions before.
Okay.
But if they didn't, here we find out that she has
For certain.
a sort of another sense to her where she can kind of predict things or feel things. She's very woo-woo as far as it goes.
Okay, so now we get into Ethan. We see the scene where Ethan's actually, doing his magic incantation, and he's praying over some sort of like a statue head. I was going to ask you if this is something they made up for the show, or if this is like a real, like Demi something or another that we should know about.
The god Janus. It's a Janus statue.
Oh, is it a Janus head? Okay.
Yes, I am not sure.
That's okay.
I'm so sorry. Just a quick look up here on the computer. It's the ancient Roman religion and myth. Janus is a god of beginnings and gates, transitions, portals, and duality. So
Okay.
Janus ends up becoming January. So yeah, beginning of the year sort of thing. Yeah. So not going
Nice.
to read any further on it, but yeah, they were pulling from something. The statue has two heads, right? Two faces, the front and the back. One is
Front and back. That's right.
one is like a normal looking bust, and the other one is a little bit like maniacal looking and smiley.
Yep.
And he's doing some sort of strange
Incantation.
incantation. Yep. And then we cut from there to Halloween night. Buffy and Willow, they're getting dressed and ready to go.
Now, Buffy has talked Willow into not the ghost costume. She's going to be dressed in like I don't know what she's dressed up as, to be honest with you, but she's definitely, she's got the midriff showing. She's got a lot of makeup. She
And
kind of
she's
looks
wearing
like
a mini
a
dress as well,
rocker.
or a skirt,
Yeah.
short skirt or something. Yeah. Yeah. She's revealing skin that she never reveals.
And she's very uncomfortable. She's like, "This isn't me." And Buffy says, "That's the point."
Yes. Yes. And as Buffy goes down in that 18th century, down the steps in her 18th century dress to greet Will Xander, who's coming in his best army fatigues, I guess. He's like, just wait till you get a load of Willow, right? And as she
Yep.
comes to the top of the steps, she's actually wearing the ghost costume over her mini dress. And they're like,
Right.
oh, it's like just kind of the air gets let out of the balloon. And there was like, oh, okay. And from then they head on out. And
Right.
yeah, so, they go out in the streets and it's very sweet for a few moments with the children being led by Buffy. And at the same time, you go right back to Ethan, who's still doing the incantation, and it's go time, right? And
Uh-huh.
what his incantation does is it turns everybody out there in trick or treat land into what they are dressed as. So these little kids who are goblins and ghouls become goblins and ghouls, and it does so as they are collecting candy from a sweet little old lady, and they begin to attack her.
Yep.
This turns Xander into a military guy with a real machine gun. It turns Willow into a real ghost who has to walk around outside of her sheet because as a ghost, she's incorporeal. And so she just goes right through the sheet. One wonders why she doesn't then also go right through her clothes, but it was a way to get her walking around in the revealing clothes. And
Right.
Buffy is the hapless 18th century, basically dolt of a woman.
Right.
This episode does not have a view of highborn nobility in the 18th century. They make
No,
fun
and
of
I
it.
think that's on purpose for I think that's something that comes back later on in Buffy too, by the way.
Right, right, right. Well, meanwhile, I mean, I don't want to like go too far ahead, but what ends up happening is you find out that Cordelia, who dressed skin tight leotard as a cat, does not become a cat.
Right.
But they're all running for their lives, trying to figure out how to get away from all these ghouls that are now all over the street, and they're attacking.
Sure.
And Spike is out there kind of patrolling, walking around, and he goes, wow. And my favorite line is, this is neat. And he just
Yes, this
enjoys
is
the
neat.
chaos.
That's right.
Yeah. Buffy's she can't be helped. Willow leads everybody because he's just like got his gun out and shooting at people. So she's like the only one with the Scooby brain. And she's like, let's get back to my friend's house. And they go to Buffy's home. Of course, Joyce is nowhere to be found. Cordelia is there wondering what the heck's going wrong with Buffy. They pair her up with Xander. Willow's with Buffy. And Angel enters into the scene. And he shows up
Right.
trying to help out. And chaos is ensuing. And it's kind of cute, or not cute, but kind of funny to see the children's become goblins because they're like little 2-foot, half-pint villains. But that's all going on at this very same time. And yeah, and I guess Giles is remaining in the library to cross-reference because Halloween is such a quiet night. He's just going to spend it doing some work that he needs to get caught up on. So I think I got us caught up to where we're all at.
Yeah.
Kind of
And
chaotic.
so Willow goes to catch up with Giles to tell him what's going on because she needs help and she doesn't know who else to talk to. And she explains the situation. And when she goes through the process of telling him, Buffy became an 18th century person and Xander became a soldier, he immediately goes, "Good Lord, Cordelia became an actual cat." and
Right.
and Will's like, "Oh no, she didn't." And that's when they put together the fact that it's this particular costumes from this particular location are the ones that are the problem.
Yeah, we went to a new place called Ethan's, and this is where exposition moves the story along.
Yes, that's exactly right. Okay. So meanwhile, Angel has scared Buffy because she saw his vampire face. And so she's still this 18th century woman or whatever. So she's running around trying to get away from everything. And there's some actually really beautiful cinematography when they're pushing her through the streets or whatever. And she comes upon this pirate that's played that is what our bully from earlier in the episode turned into.
Larry
Larry
the pirate. He's a very famous pirate, Larry the pirate.
Then we cut to Giles showing up at Ethan's and finding out that, and then we discover that he and Ethan have some sort of history, and it's fairly mysterious. But I think this is the first time we hear Giles referred to as Ripper. Is this true?
Yes. Yep. He calls him the Ripper. And not only do they have history, but he seems to imply that Giles is dangerous. And nothing seems further from the truth. And he points it out. Look at you wearing your tweed and your buttoned up attitude.
Well, in addition to that, they even did a thing earlier in the episode that we didn't really talk about, where when Buffy and Willow are trying to steal the Watcher journals, Buffy is able to distract him by telling him that Jenny Calendar thinks that he's a babe.
Hunk of burning love.
That's
She says,
right.
You're a hunk of burning love, which I thought was funny.
And in this scene, we are reminded that Giles is kind of a less serious character most of the time. And so I think that was there to set us up to understand, that this conversation with Ethan makes him a much more complicated character.
Well, in his physicality, he hits Ethan in the gut and then grabs him by the head and then knees him, and he does it without even looking, but looking toward, kind of not at the camera but adjacent to the camera, kind of looking off, as if he was kind of zoning out into maybe a disassociative kind of place for a moment. Like he fell into an old groove, as I would say. So he's got the muscle memory. He's got more than muscle memory about some violence. And so and then when they cut later and he's questioning Ethan, he's very menacingly taking his handkerchief and wiping his ring on his fingers has got a little blood on it, and it just cuts to that image twice, and he's just like dispassionately asking him how to stop the spell. And you're like, boy, he's cool under fire too. So he's had experiences, and Ethan knows them. And as we cut back to the scene that you mentioned with Larry the pirate, who is going to attack the 18th century Buffy, which they're fitting, their costumes are fitting the same era. Xander shows up and is able to totally whip Larry, and they get into a fist fight, and he totally whips him, which is really important to remember for the payoff, because it's helpful for, we close the loop on his kind of his emasculated sensibility. But
That's right.
Ethan is on the ground, and is Giles the Ripper stands over him saying, "How do you break the spell?" He just kind of quickly tells him, "Just smash the statue of Janice's head." And they smash the statue. And at that moment, Xander turns into Xander, and you turn around, and there's this moment. Well, I guess at the same time, I should have said, the Spike shows up with a gang of ghouls, and they've cornered everybody. And he's leaning over Buffy, the hapless 18th century woman, and he's about to take a bite of the sweetest meat out here, basically, because he says that the sweetest meat is unprotected out here. And she turns back to Buffy, and she's like, "Hello," and then she totally kicks his butt. And everyone that he was with, that is Spike, everyone that Spike was with, all of the ghouls are now these hapless trick-or-treaters, these kids. Which I thought, I'm going to say this to Alan, how funny is it that this show turned a bunch of innocent children into demons? And that they're all like riding hard, man, with Spike. They're all like ride or die. Vigilantism almost. They're not vigilantes, but they're riding like vigilantes with him down the street. Also, I wondered about the metaphysics of it all. Like, if a vampire is a soulless person with a demon that's in them, what were these people? Is their soul in absentia? What we do know is that every one of them felt trapped and unable to get out. Xander says the same thing, except for it felt oddly good, or it felt an odd sense of closure beating up the pirate.
Yeah, that's right.
Closing the loop on the emasculation. So, yeah.
But of course, when this happens, Willow just disappears.
She's a ghost. So she goes back to her original resting spot on the front porch.
That's right.
Of someone's house. It's like, where'd Willow go? Yeah.
That's right. And so then she pulls the sheet off of herself, and she's like, I got to find my friends or whatever. So she starts walking. And she walks right in front of a van being driven by Oz, and Oz's reaction is wonderful. It's one of the things that I remembered about this episode without watching it again. He says, "Who is that girl?" Which is his line that he keeps saying every time he sees her. He's seen her a couple times now.
Yes, he's in his Jinko pants, I think, his bell-bottomy pants, probably.
Right.
But yeah, he's taken with her. It's really sweet too. And I like the fact that when she stands up as the ghost, she takes off the ghost costume
Mhm.
and she walks around with confidence in her because she's been leading all night.
That's right.
I don't think it had to do with sexuality. It wasn't like anyone was fawning over because it was chaos, but she was in leadership. She was telling people, "There's a problem. Listen to me. I got the answers," and she kept everyone safe.
That's right.
And so she's feeling herself a little bit more.
That's right.
And we cut from that scene where Oz sees her and comments on who is that girl, to Buffy's bedroom where there's angels lying down and she walks in wearing sweats. And he's like, "So why did you think I'd like you in that other outfit you wore?" And she was honest about the kind of women that he was into, and she didn't feel like she could measure up. And he ends up saying that they were basically dull, and he didn't like them.
Yeah.
And you know, I think they get with the smoochies, and we have to end the whole episode with Giles returning to Ethan's the next day, which I've always found interesting. Like when he comes back the next day after Ethan's already run away, his whole store's like packed up and gone.
Mhm.
Like we're talking about this guy's got a lot of energy. He just packed it all up. And there's a card that says "See you soon."
Be
or
seeing
something.
you.
Yeah, be
Be
seeing
seeing
you.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I do love this episode. I think it's just because I'm a sucker for a Halloween episode, but I like how traditionally there's not a lot going on in Halloween, and I like how Ethan comes in and causes this furor. I think it's
Uh-huh.
fun. What do you think? What's your hot take on this show, this episode?
This was their first Halloween episode they ever did, and the metaphor for Halloween is pretty clear. Halloween's the night where we get to be someone other than who we are, right? And so that's what happens to everybody. Essentially, even Giles becomes someone other than who he is because we see him from his past, you know. In some ways, Willow doesn't become the person other than who she is. She becomes the person she is because who she's been is the disguise,
Mm.
you know? And I think that all of that is just glorious. And the reason that I love this episode so much is because it's a real turning point for our two intelligent characters. When we organize characters and stories, we usually try to set things up so that there are opposite characteristics from our main characters, so that we can have interesting conflict or interesting conversation in every scene. And one of the best things about Buffy is the Giles, Xander, Buffy, Willow relationship because of how well thought out their opposites are. I'll say this very quickly for the audience. I'm sure you know all this nonsense, but one of the classic character trios, of course, is Kirk, Spock, and McCoy from Star Trek. And the idea there is they set up Spock to be logic, McCoy to be emotion, and Kirk to be balance. And that's a really, really standard trio. They did the same thing with Harry Potter. Hermione is logic and Ron is emotion and Harry is balance. When they have four characters, but they're trying to do the whole logical versus emotional thing. They have a challenge, because they have to figure out how to have an additional character trait that represents opposites. So you have the Buffy and Xander, who are your emotional characters, and you have Giles and Willow, who are your intelligent characters. But the way emotionalism is represented in Buffy versus Xander is wildly different, and the way intelligence is represented in Giles versus Willow is wildly different. And that's how they keep all that stuff, interesting whenever you have these character dynamics. And so I think that this is my take on it would be that I think that Whedon and his writers have had an easy time figuring out how to develop their emotional characters because that's the place that they're coming from as people. And I think it took them until now to figure out what they could do with the intelligent characters.
That is an interesting analysis and sense. I wondered, do you not think, given what you just described, because I'm learning with you right now, do you not think that Buffy represents the balance character? You said emotion,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
like
I actually think in some ways yes, but in some ways no. The reason that I think that specifically is because I actually read a thing from Whedon about how he organized the characters, so I know that's how he conceptualized it. But you're right, because she's definitely got, okay, she is emotionally intelligent
Mhm.
beyond her years.
Yes.
Interestingly, though, I think that
And she's
Xander's
also in well, I just
okay.
wanna also give for her credit, she's also more intelligent than anyone lets on. Like, she has
Yes,
ability in school too. She just right.
100%,
Right,
100%
right, right,
agreed.
right. But you said
But I
about
also think that
Xander?
Xander is also emotionally intelligent in really, really interesting ways, you
Mm.
know? But I think that but when I'm saying intelligent here, maybe a better word is logical, you
Logical,
know?
rational. Yeah, sure.
Right. And so I think that Buffy's emotional disposition is coming from a place of confidence, whereas Xander's emotional disposition is coming from a place of insecurity. And I think the same thing's true for Giles and Willow. Giles is coming from a place of security, and Willow's coming from a place of insecurity. And I think that makes it really, really difficult, because what happens if those characters grow too much out of insecurity? They're going to have to change some other dynamic in order to keep the character dynamics interesting. And that is a challenge for an ongoing series like this. Like part of the reason this kind of thing, but what I mean by this kind of thing is part of the reason that television shows previous to Buffy didn't have a lot of character change. They let the character change happen in side characters, like people who were being introduced for the episode, and the main characters didn't change much, is because that idea of our main characters changing through the series makes things really, really complicated for the
Mhm.
storytellers. The X-Files is a great example. You can't have Mulder change too much, or it completely defeats how the dynamics of the X-Files are going to work. You can't have Scully change too much, or it'll defeat the dynamics of the show, despite the fact that Scully should have changed like 5 times through that series, you
Well,
know?
listen, man, I'm watching that now with my wife. I tell you what, Mulder's a jerk. I never thought of it before, but the more I go on, the more I'm like, man, gosh, mansplainer much? I mean, he is just anyway. I get what you're saying. Let me ask you another strange question. I don't want to squeeze and press this metaphor, or maybe this isn't really a metaphor, but
Sure.
in terms of storytelling, when you're representing those three character types,
Right.
and you bring in more characters,
Mhm.
does it matter that they represent something so are their characters able to be more fluid, or do they have to also represent like a different personality, right? Or a different type? Like
Yeah, there needs to be something about them that's gonna create some sort of dynamic, that's interesting to deal with, which is part of the reason that, frankly, a lot of the other characters are almost cartoonishly undeveloped, right? In order to make sure that they're really, really easy to pigeonhole. I mean, Cordelia is in this series, she's completely different when she gets to Angel. But in Cordelia in Buffy is really there to be the person that Buffy would have been if Buffy had not become the Slayer.
right, right.
Angel remains cartoonishly vague the entire time he's on Buffy, because he's really there to be the man meat. He's there to be the object of desire for Buffy.
Man candy.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I tell you my favorite little quote in this episode? Probably not
Sure.
besides
Yeah, give it
when
to me.
Spike
Give it
says
to me.
when Spike says neat. I love that. But this goes back to Cordelia and Oz. Cordelia comes up to Oz. Oz is in his locker getting out his guitar or
Yes.
something. And she goes,
Yes.
"Are you guys playing tonight?" Oz says, "Yeah, at the Shelter Club." Cordelia says, "Is Mr. I'm the lead singer. I'm so great. I don't have to show up for my date or even call. Gonna be there." And Oz goes, "Yeah, he's just going by Devin now." Just deadpan too. And she's like, "You could tell him this, but don't tell him and do this." And so don't tell him anything then, right? It's just really funny.
There's a future episode where Xander is talking to Oz, and he basically says something to the effect of, Oz, you're really cool. Do you think it has something to do with the way that you expressed yourself in short, non-committal phrases? And Oz says, could be.
Right. Oh, and the line that Buffy says when Spike is about to bite her and then she
Mhm.
becomes Buffy again, she says, "Hi, honey, I'm home. Boy, it's good to be me." And then just that's another good one.
Yeah.
So,
That is a great one. That is a great one. And I think some summarization of thematically what the episode's trying to do. I think this one's firing on all cylinders. It's really we said in a previous episode that when we were talking about season 1, at some point that this is where I actually think it was when we were talking about the witch. I said, this is where Buffy's like trying to find its legs for the metaphor of what it means to be a high school student. I think this one's the one where they really have figured out how to do that, and they're going to be able to do this thematic introspection of an idea from a bunch of different angles better and better over the next several episodes.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to getting into it with you. As always, going down these roads of these memory lanes, man. I'm enjoying it. So
Yeah, man, me too.
everybody out there, we hope you're enjoying it too. And if you're interested in more, just hang with us, and we'll
That's right.
get back at it next week. See you next time.